Ford's recent announcement that they'll no longer be selling the Ford Fiesta, buying a new small car has become harder and harder. But one brand that still thinks small cars is very important is Mazda. In fact, recently they added a new car and engine option into their small cars. This is a Mazda 2, launched in 2015, and it's had a few face changes since then. This is also a Mazda 2, but based on the Toyota Yaris, it gives customers the option of having a strong hybrid, basing all of the focus on fuel economy. But if you still like your traditional small cars and you want an uncomplicated engine, then this Mazda 2 could be the one for you. In today's video, this is the one that I'm going to be focusing on, the traditional Mazda 2. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know and tell you about the recent changes that this car has had. If you did want an in-depth review of this Mazda 2 based on the Toyota Yaris, then let me know in the comments down below and I'll be happy to do that. So if you want to find out everything there is to know, then please keep watching. And if you do like new car reviews and car content, then this is the place to be. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button and join the John Banks Review channel. Although both cars share the Mazda 2 nameplate, they're actually completely different from the ground up. New chassis, new engine options, and the main difference is the other Mazda 2, based on the Toyota Yaris, is a strong hybrid. That means it will run in electric alone. So if you're looking for the best fuel economy, then this may be the option to go for. This version, however, is still a hybrid, but it's a mild hybrid. So it gets a slight amount of electrification, which helps with the power output and also your fuel economy. Under the bonnet of every version of this Mazda 2, you get a 1.5 litre petrol engine. That's a 4-cylinder, and there isn't any turbocharging. In fact, there's no turbocharging across any of the Mazda range. And that's because they use some very clever systems, which mean that you get just enough power without the need of a turbocharger. Not having a turbocharger means the car is lighter, and it also means it's slightly more reliable. There are 3 different power outputs that you can have out of this engine. You have an entry-level 75 brake horsepower, you then have a 90 brake horsepower and a range-topping 115 brake horsepower. Differences to the exterior of the Mazda 2 changed this year. You see, it was first released in 2015. It then had a face change in 2019, and then for 2023, you got a few external and internal changes, which just gave it a freshen up. The main difference is the grille. So you can get this car in 4 different trim levels. There's a Century line. You then have this version, which is the exclusive line, which you can tell because it has little yellow stripes on the front and on the back. And you also have a range-topping Hamura and Hamura Acca. These are the slightly sportier versions. You'll notice that on this car, you actually have quite a blanked off front grille. It feels a little bit electric, and this is to give it a modern twist. If you do go for the Hamura or the Hamura Acca, that actually becomes a honeycomb grille instead. There's also some slight changes around the back where you've lost a lot of the grey bumper and it's now all body colour coded, and you have a black piece of trim that goes across the back just to simplify it and make it look a lot more modern. I'll be the first to admit that new cars are pretty difficult to get used to nowadays. There's lots of gadgets and gizmos, and especially with so much now being in the touchscreens, it can get very confusing. But if you're looking for a car which is really simple to use, it doesn't get much better than this. For instance, you still have physical climate control dials, and they've got some really nice heavy weighted metal surrounds, so really easy to use when driving. All versions, including the entry-level Century line, also come with climate control and air conditioning as standard as well. On top of that, you can use the touchscreen as a physical touchscreen, but you can also use the central control dials down the center console, and this is brilliant. It means that using the touchscreen whilst driving is really easy and you're not going to be distracted because you can simply use the buttons down your left hand side. This is actually pretty rare nowadays, with most buttons now being in the touchscreen. But I love the fact that you have the option to use either. You also have some nice clear buttons on the steering wheel, which includes your cruise control and your volume for your radio. Plus, if you go for this model, which is the exclusive line, you also get your paddles behind the steering wheel if you go for the automatic gearbox. Now, in terms of spec, the Mazda 2 is really well specified. If you go for the entry-level centre line, then you get things like rear parking sensors, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and satellite navigation as standard, as well as that cruise control that I mentioned. Now, if you step up for this model, which is the exclusive line, then you also get a rear view camera and you get a couple of other upgrades which include keyless entry. Now, if you go for the Hamora, this is mostly based on a sportier specification. You still get the same options as you get in the exclusive line, but it's slightly sportier in its styling on the interior and the exterior. If you step up for the top spec Hamora Acca, then you also get some really nice options like a 360-degree parking camera. You also get a heated steering wheel, heated seats, and you get a slightly upgraded interior again with part leather seats. Another bit of good news about the Mazda 2 is despite a lot of brands ditching their manual gearbox, you can still get this car with a manual box, which is really great for all those people who do want that more back to basics car. You also get a physical handbrake as well. I know that this is a lot of people's preference. If you do go for the second model up, which is this one, which is the exclusive line, you also get the addition of a sports button. So you get a little dial in the center console which you can tap, and that will pop you into sports mode, and it will give you slightly sharper acceleration and the car will become a bit more responsive. As I mentioned previously, there are 3 different engine options. All are a petrol and you get 75 brake horsepower, 90 and 115. This model is the sweet spot that I think, and that is the 90 brake horsepower. You do have to remember that this car doesn't have any turbocharging, and that means you might need to slightly work the car a little bit harder than you would in other turbocharged models. But that's definitely not a bad thing at all, and in my eyes that's a reason to go for the manual gearbox. It means that you can work yourself through the gears and it's a little bit easier to get that power from the car. When you're in the automatic box, it's really great and it's a really easy drive, but you do get slight more noise from the engine as it accelerates. Inside the boot of the Mazda 2, you'll find 255 litres, which isn't the biggest in its class, but it's still reasonably usable. You can fit plenty of storage in there, including 2 big suitcases, a few small suitcases and loads of shopping. The main problem is there's quite a significant load lip, so that means getting items in and out of the boot might be a bit difficult if you don't have the best mobility. Similar to the boot space in the rear isn't the biggest in its class, but it's more than usable. I've got an okay amount of legroom. I've actually got quite a nice amount of headroom as well, so it's pretty good. The only shame is that there isn't much storage or amenities back here. So you haven't got a central armrest, and you also haven't got any storage in the door cards either. So there's not really anywhere to put drinks other than a little bit of storage where you could pop it here in the center console. The Mazda 2 is actually a 5-seater, so you can carry 4 passengers, 3 in the back with the central seat. However, you probably only want to do that for short journeys and on rare occasions, because there is quite a significant hump in the floor where the transmission tunnel is, and that means that whoever sits in the middle will need to straddle that either side. But for the rare occasions that you need that extra seat, it's really handy, and I actually think it's pretty comfortable back here. Storage in the front is a similar story. Here you also won't find the most amount of storage. You do have some door cards which are big enough to put a small bottle of water in, but they're not particularly large. You also have a couple of cup holders here and that little bit of storage which goes through to the back as well. You do have a tiny bit of storage underneath the climate control, but annoyingly it doesn't fit my mobile phone perfectly in there. That is going to rattle around slightly. But you do get a really decent sized glove box, and for this class of car, I can't see the limited storage options being an issue. I find it interesting that people have always claimed that the Ford Fiesta is the sweetest handling of all small cars. However, one, the Fiesta is no more, and also I think that the Mazda 2 could give that car a run for its money. The steering is really well weighted, and actually Mazda have injected some of the personality in the steering of the MX-5. So that means that this car is pretty engaging, no matter which engine you go for. Despite being a car that's been on sale since 2015, that doesn't mean that the Mazda 2 misses out on safety equipment. It still gets a ton of safety tech as standard. That includes your anti-collision warning, you also get lane assist as standard, and as you go up the higher trim levels, you'll also get blind spot detection and rear cross traffic alert. With the introduction of the new Mazda 2 based on the Toyota Yaris, that may have left you wondering, is there any point of still having the existing Mazda 2? But I really hope that today's video has proved that it certainly still has its place in the market. If you're looking for a small car with a simple engine setup and also a really user-friendly cabin, then I don't think it gets much better than this. There isn't many cars nowadays, let alone small cars, that you can still control the touchscreen using a central scroller. But let me know, what do you think of the Mazda 2? Would you go for this version, or would you opt for the hybrid? Either way, if you wanted any more information on either cars or anything else in the Mazda lineup, then you can get in contact with one of our sales associates via the link down below. I really hope you've enjoyed this video today, guys. If you have, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up. Want to see more? Then go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Until next time, see you later.